This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Information at vachamber.com. Virginia hospitals and health systems provide jobs. They support our economy and promote public health. Local hospitals are always open to help people with unexpected health needs. Having a stable healthcare network is vital. Virginia hospitals are our lifeline.
It's amazing what my students with special needs can accomplish. Their pride is priceless. That's why I teach.
Brought to you by the Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and a welcome to Megan Rhyne, Executive Director of the Virginia Coalition for Open Government. Great name. Yes. Great name. Tell our viewers some about the organization, and then let's talk about some of the issues, too.
Okay. Well, so the Coalition for Open Government started 20 years ago this year.
Oh, 20 years.
1996, wow. Yeah.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. So it was founded by mostly journalists who wanted to get across to lawmakers in particular, but to others as well, that laws governing access to records and meetings, and in Virginia it's called the Freedom of Information Act, that they are for the public, not just for the media. There was a perception for a long while that FOIA was just for the media. And they wanted to get across that, no, this is for the public. And so they founded this organization, and its primary mission is to educate the public about access issues and why they're important and how to go about doing it. And it's for government and for citizens and for the press. It's for anyone. That's why we call it a coalition.
What sort of issues, then, you're working on in 2016 on your anniversary year?
Well, day in and day out, we do, I accept phone calls and email queries, or even tweets where people are asking me questions about how to get records under the law, or what kind of requirements there are for holding public meetings. So they can just range any day. It could be a completely different question, but I'm fielding, I'd say about 5 a day. So people from all over are interested in this. On the broader scale, some of the issues that have come about, where we follow some of the ones at the state level, like recently there was that report that was released about the gentleman who died in custody waiting for transfer to a state mental hospital. And the first report that came out, it had all the names blacked out of it. So here is a report that's trying to explain how things happened, but you didn't know who was a responsible party or who was involved in this at all. And so we'll respond to things like that. There were a lot of issues that came up during the General Assembly. And there is a study going on right now at what's called the Freedom of Information Advisory Council, which is based in the legislature, that is actually reviewing all of FOIA's exemptions, and so we've been participating in that as well.
So when you say all of the exemptions, just give us a taste of what kind of things are exempt that neither the media nor the public can find out.
Yeah, and just to kind of back up one step, so the Freedom of Information Act presumes that anything that gets created during public business, the transaction of public business, is a public record. And FOIA says all public records should be open to disclosure unless an exemption applies or could apply. Now, all those exemptions are discretionary. No one has to withhold the information. They can release it if they choose to. So, with that background, I would say that some of the things that we see the most commonly referred to when they are exempt are personnel records, and that's not defined. So it can be a really big, broad category of records that could be considered a personnel record. The working papers exemption is probably the other really big exemption. The working papers exemption is for people like the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, all the members of the General Assembly, the presidents of universities, mayors, county administrators. I mean, it's a really pretty big number of people who can have this exemption, and it has to do with sort of their records that they create when they're making decisions about things. You want them to be able to get candid information from all sides without revealing it too soon, but it has become a catch-all exemption and is used pretty much any time any one of those offices is requested.
I guess one of the times that I'm recalling very recently that's made some news has been working papers regarding redistricting. And
yes. So, and that is interesting because it's actually coming up in the context of a legal privilege that's separate from FOIA, but it's on the same rationale. Yes. Where the legislators are saying a group of senators, 6 senators are saying we get to keep all of our records, even the ones that where we discussed redistricting with outside parties. They're trying to keep those protected. Under FOIA, they probably would be able to keep them protected without much. There's not much we could do about that.
Right. Now, transparency. If someone goes on your website, and we're putting the web address up during the show so that they can find it, and if they don't happen to see it, they can just Google or use any search engine for Virginia Coalition for Open Government, and they'll find your site. When I was on it, there was a big section about transparency, and as that relates even to legislation that's introduced?
Yeah, so transparency has become sort of the buzzword, and I'd say in the past 10 years, maybe a little more recently, and it has different meanings on different sides of the counter, so to speak. Right. When lawmakers and those in government talk about transparency, they're talking usually about information that they have and that they are voluntarily putting out there. And that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong, that's a good thing. But when we talk about transparency, we also mean what citizens choose to want to see. It's not up to the government to decide what it is I get to see. I get to ask the government to show me what I want to see. And it's different for different people. People have different priorities and just different interests. And so we need to be able to have that access without the government deciding, no, you only get to see what we've decided to put out there. So it's a very broad term, and it's in some ways starting to lose some of its meaning. I think anytime somebody says is trying to be candid, they say, well, I'm just being transparent. And so
during the session, it was interesting that a transparency caucus sort of was started by a conservative senator and a more liberal House member, in which they were saying they were going to record video and audio all of the bills that they presented in subcommittees, so that I put them on the website so they could be seen, because what happens in subcommittees is not really covered that much.
No, and so much of the work, especially on the House side, gets done in the subcommittees, and that caucus, I know, that was a nice response. They were both freshmen
Yes.
legislators, and they came in and they say, we want to do things a little differently. And I heard a lot of, more seasoned lawmakers support them in principle, but I don't know if that caught on. Maybe next year they'll have a little bit more support. But we wish that there was a better mechanism for letting the public know about both subcommittee work and committee work.
So if the Virginia Coalition for Open Government, of which you're the executive director, could wave a magic wand and saying, here are a couple of things that we think should be changed in state government, what would come to the top of your wish list?
In state government, and state agencies or state legislature?
You pick, your choice.
Well, there are things that are in the law that I would like to change, and most of it would have to do with the narrowing of exemptions and the clarification of procedures in general. Better definition of what an acceptable fee is to charge for records, and better enforcement. But ultimately, what has to change is the culture. And that is because, I always use the analogy of a play, that you have a script and you put it in the hands of a director who has a different cast and different resources and a different facility and all that, and you get different productions. Right. And that's what happens with the Freedom of Information Act as well. It's the same words, but you have to have people who are willing to embrace it and be willing to kind of step outside their comfort zone for a lot of them, to say that this is the public's business, this is the public's works, and I may be embarrassed by this, but I got to do it. So that's what needs to change, if I had my magic wand.
Right.
But
now you mentioned the fees, so stick with that for just a moment, because sometimes one does hear of what appears to be fairly high fees charged by agencies for making copies, and I guess it's not just the cost of putting it on a machine and copying it. They're saying it's all pulling it out of other records, so that's probably a tough one to get your hands around.
Yeah, and that's something that has changed over the past few years too. I have a couple of theories that I've never had any academic research to back it up, but I think when the recession hit and local governments in particular, but state as well, but when they started to have budget pressures and they started losing staff, losing money, routine requests that may have been given away for free before, now they're being charged for. And they've always had that ability to charge, but maybe they wouldn't have before, and now they are. Another thing is that so many people now are asking for records having to do with email, and that is often something that a clerk who may have been able to search file cabinets before isn't equipped to go back and search servers or backup tapes or do global searches for a state agency that has 200 employees. So there are some external pressures, I think, on government right now that's been leading to some of this ratcheting up of fees. But it can be a deterrent.
Yes. Well, Megan Rhyne, Virginia Coalition of Open Government, you could almost say good government. We thank you. Thank you for being on This Week in Richmond, and encourage our viewers to go to the website and to learn more about whether it's Freedom of Information Act or about open government. But thank you very much for being on This Week in Richmond.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I'm David Bailey, host of This Week in Richmond, but I'm sitting in the guest chair right now because I'd like to talk with you some about the process moving forward now between this time of the year and the 2017 legislative session. First, I'd like to point you to one of the most helpful websites that you will find to help you keep up with what's happening in the General Assembly, even when they're not in session. It's the Legislative Information System website, LIS. And we're going to put up a screenshot in just a moment of the main page of that website, where you can see what's there that's right at your fingertips. The information on this LIS website goes from 1994 up through 2016. So it's a wealth of information. You see on the screen right now the page that you will find when you go onto that LIS, Legislative Information System website. You'll find information about bills and resolutions, and you can click that and get information. Underneath that, you find General Assembly members, and you can go on there and you'll find out what bills each legislature introduced. Standing committees, the state budget, daily floor calendars, so you can see what occurred each day during the session, communications between the two chambers, the minutes. The minutes don't go into all the discussion about who said what, but the minutes give you the information on bills and the action taken on the bills. Beneath that is the link to meetings. And I will tell you that about this time of the year, I keep as my home page on one of my browsers the portion that says meetings. And so I look immediately to see what meetings are occurring. And on the first and third weeks of every month of the year, there is a tremendous number of meetings, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and oftentimes also on Thursday. House Appropriations meeting monthly, Senate Finance meeting monthly, the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, known as JLARC, meeting practically every month also. And so on the meeting list, you can find information that would help you know meetings that are occurring here at the session. Occasionally I'm asked, well, are those meetings open? Absolutely. Every meeting of the General Assembly, of the standing committees, of these special committees is open. In every meeting, there's some opportunity for some public comment. Well, at least almost every meeting, there would be opportunity for public comment. But certainly there's the opportunity for the public to be present. You won't find these meetings on the web that you can see what occurred, so you really need to be present if it's something that very much interests you. You also will find on that page something called Lobbyist in the Box, and it's a way whereby you can track bills, and you can track a certain number of bills at no cost to anyone in the public. And so the information on that LIS system is extremely important, not just when they're in session, but throughout the year. Over on the left side of that page that you find all kinds of links, one of them being that you can go back to see what happened in 1994. Governor Allen's administration, you can come right on through to the current year, current session. But also when you come now, I want to take you to another screenshot of another page, because you will find that there are statistics that tell you about the number of bills introduced and what happened to those bills. Now, I understand you may not be able to read that on the screen unless you have a very large TV screen that you're seeing right now, but you'll see that the bills that were introduced, the bills, the resolutions, and then the joint resolutions from each chamber. And you will find on there then what occurred to those bills, how many of them passed, how many of them died. The particular column that I would call your attention to is bills that were carried over to the 2017 session. I do mean carried over. They didn't pass, they didn't die. They were left in some committee, but not left in committee to die, because if you see on the system the bill was left in committee, that's a rather polite way of saying the bill died in committee. They passed the deadline for the committee to act and the bill died in the committee. But you will find a category of bills that were continued. That only happens in the even number years when there's no intervening election for the General Assembly. So 2016, even member year, then you find over 200 bills that were carried over. I will tell you from my experience over the years, most of the bills that are carried over are what I would describe as being put on life support, and then before the calendar year ends, they're just allowed to die. The bills that are carried over must be acted on if they're going to stay alive. And to be acted on, the committee has to meet. And so on occasion, some of the bills that are carried over, the committee chair checks with the patron, they're not ready for the bill to be voted on, and they just rather politely then let the bill languish and die. The deadline in 2016 is the committees must act on the bill by midnight, December 1st. That's a long ways from now. That's months away. But they must act by December 1st or the bill dies in committee. Some of these bills, out of the 200 plus bills, will be worked on by the committee, will be perhaps amended in committee, will get in a status in which the committee is ready to report the bill. And so sometime between now and December 1st, the committee meets, they act on the bill, they recommend reporting the bill is reported, and when the session convenes on the 11th of January, 2017, those few bills out of the 200 plus will be immediately on the calendar of the floor or of the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate. They'll be up right away. So it's very important, if you have a bill as a citizen that's a carried over bill, or more officially continued to 2017, then you'll want to stay in touch with the patron of the bill. You'll want to be informed about that committee having a meeting. If the committee is going to meet, it may be a bill that you would prefer that it not be reported. It may be a bill that you wish to see it move forward and be reported. Whatever your perspective is on the bill, it's an opportunity to stay informed and be involved with that bill as it goes forward. The other interesting column to look at is the number of bills that failed, a very large number, oftentimes well over half the bills that were introduced, bills that failed. Most of the bills that failed will be back next year. In sessions of the General Assembly with citizen legislators with only 60 days in the long session and 46 in the short session, oftentimes it takes at least 2 years for a bill to be ready for action by the General Assembly and to pass. There are any number of bills that come back 2 or 3 years before they finally are enacted into law. I encourage people to examine the list of bills that were, not only the bills carried over, but examine closely the list of the bills that failed to report, and to be aware that just because they failed to report in 1 year doesn't mean that they will not be considered positively in the upcoming session. Upcoming session, second Wednesday of January 2017. Now, in summary, I would say go to that LIS page, particularly make note of the meetings link, and be aware that every first and third week there are any number of meetings here at the General Assembly building or here at the Capitol in Richmond, and some meetings will be listed there that are occurring in other places around the Commonwealth. It's an opportunity to stay involved, to stay informed, and as citizens of the Commonwealth, to assist citizen legislators in enacting good laws. Again, this is David Bailey, host of This Week in Richmond, And we look forward to bringing you reports from the Capitol each week during the legislative session and each week during the year. So thank you very much for tuning in to This Week in Richmond, and we hope to see you again next week.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community. For jobs, the economy, and public health, Virginia Hospitals, our lifeline.
The Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.